Hi, this is Dan Smith of DPS Legal Counsel, where I focus on serving the business law needs of health professionals and entrepreneurs, helping them to start, grow, and protect their practices and their small businesses. Today's episode is a video episode of Legal Scrubs, where I'm going to be talking about issues really pertaining to health professionals. And in today's episode, I'm going to be talking to, for the most part, medical students who are still in school, haven't yet started their residency, and I'm also going to be talking to doctors who may be looking to make some changes with their practice if they're in primary care. So let's get started. The reason I'm talking today mostly to medical students and people preparing for their residencies is because I want to talk about two news stories that were discussed in today's Wall Street Journal. The first one was about a hospital in Philadelphia, Hahnemann Hospital, which has been undergoing bankruptcy. It's in a bankruptcy proceeding, and I may have done a video episode of Legal Scrubs or a podcast some time ago, because this case has been going on since last summer, I believe. But at one point, the Hahnemann Hospital was looking to actually sell, as one of its assets in the bankruptcy court, its residency program, and essentially sell the assets of the hospital in that regard, which would essentially be the residents themselves. Sell their rights to be residents to another hospital or another program. Now that apparently has never come to fruition. I think that fell through, and so that's not what this article was about in today's paper. What the article was about is, because the hospital is going through this bankruptcy proceeding, the residents that are in the program there at Hahnemann Hospital in Philadelphia have been struggling and kind of trying to figure out what to do about paying their malpractice insurance premiums, because without the hospital stepping up to pay those insurance premiums, the premiums for some of the doctors could be close to $100,000 per year. And so this was a major problem for the residents, because if they're going to go into another residency program, they're going to go into private practice, wherever they're going to go, you don't want to have this gap in your coverage where you're not covered by claims that might come down the road for something that was done while you were a resident there at Hahnemann Hospital. And so getting someone to pay these premiums where the hospital was in bankruptcy was really an issue. And what was discussed in today's article in the Wall Street Journal was that Hahnemann Hospital is stepping up in the bankruptcy proceeding to pay the biggest portion of the malpractice insurance premiums for its residents, and an affiliated company to the hospital that's owned by one of the investors who own the company, or is very an insider at least, or a major owner of the company that acquired the hospital. That a related company is going to pick up the remaining portion of the malpractice premium. So between the hospital and this related company to the hospital, the residents' malpractice premiums are going to get covered and paid, which is a great solution for these residents as they're going into other programs. The other main article that was in today's paper was about the trend, I guess is the right word, but of health insurance companies acquiring primary care physician practices, and essentially having a related arm of the insurance company that's actually providing direct primary care services to people, and particularly to people who are insured by the insurance company. So one of the examples that was in the article in today's Wall Street Journal was with regard to United Healthcare. which I believe is the largest health insurer in the world. They have a related company or a relationship with a company called Optum, and in California, they're rolling out there's a proposal to roll out a product or an insurance plan that would allow for reduced fees or perhaps no co-payments for patients who are insured by United Healthcare and go to a primary care clinic that's operated through Optum. So essentially the insurance company is incentivizing its insureds, its subscribers, to use the primary care clinics that the insurance company owns or a related company owns. And so that was one example. Another example was with Aetna Health Insurance Company. It was acquired, or maybe I have that backwards, it acquired CVS, the pharmacy company. It's either one or the other. I can't remember who acquired who, whether Aetna acquired CVS or CVS acquired Aetna. I think it was CVS acquired Aetna. But anyway, there's this tight, close relationship between Aetna Health Insurance and CVS, the pharmacy company. And because of that, there is a incentivization given to Aetna insureds or subscribers to use the CVS primary care minute clinics. And if they do, then it may be that there's no fee, it's covered, no copay, something along those lines. And so there's an incentive for Aetna subscribers, insurance policy holders, to use the CVS minute clinics for their primary care. So those are the two articles I wanted to discuss and how that might impact some of the thinking for medical students as they think ahead a little bit about what they want to do with their residency. And also, if you are a physician who's actually already out in the marketplace in a primary care practice, how this might impact you. So first of all, I'd say there are a number of, maybe 3 or 4 different bullet point takeaways you can get from these two cases. First of all, if you're in medical school and you're getting ready to, thinking about going into a residency, you want to make really, really sure, to the extent that you have options and you can do your research and talk to people, to make sure that the residency program that you're going into, the hospital that's affiliated with the residency program you're going into, is strong. You see what happened with the Hahnemann Hospital in Philadelphia, went bankrupt because essentially the article talked about the fact that a large part of its payments were coming through government payment programs like Medicare, Medicaid, that type of thing. You want to make sure that the hospital that you go to is not totally dependent or substantially dependent on government payors for its viability. You want to make sure that you go into a program that has a strong hospital. So do your research, check into things, see what, to the extent you can find, what the amounts are, percentages are from government payors versus private payors to the hospital. That's a good thing to look into. You want to make sure it's a strong program that's not going to, once you get into the program, go bankrupt, because then you're going to have the same issues the residents had at Hahnemann, scrambling around trying to see not only what program can they go into now, but who's going to cover their malpractice premiums. That's one takeaway. A second takeaway is, if you're interested in going into primary care, you have to be aware that there's a lot of stress and tension on the healthcare services that are provided by primary care physicians. You have insurance companies now buying primary care practices and competing with private primary care practices, like you see with United Healthcare and with Aetna. You have government payment systems that make it sometimes difficult for physicians who are providing primary care to make a living. You have mid-level practitioners such as nurse practitioners and physician assistants competing with physicians for providing primary care services to patients. And so if you're thinking about going into primary care, you want to make really sure that that's where your passion is, that's what you want to do. And I would suggest that if you can go into a niche within primary care that has some procedural component to it, where you're actually providing some procedures to your patients, I think that would help insulate you a bit from having all the competition from mid-level providers, all the payment issues from the government, and maybe and also just competition from companies like Aetna and United Healthcare that are going into the primary care, minute clinics and other places. If you do some procedural work that they can't get at locations that are in competition with you like that, then that's going to give you a stronger position to be in. I was on a flight not that long ago, and my seatmate, one person was sitting next to me, was a physician from another state, and he was basically retired, but he was a primary care doctor, or had been a primary care doctor. He was talking about how important it was for doctors to have what he called gimmicks. And what he really meant was, and we talked about it, was doctors who were able to provide some type of procedure component to their practices, other than just straight, pure primary care, so that there was some protection, insulation against competition from mid-level providers if you can provide a procedure that only doctors can provide. So I would say that to you as a second takeaway if you're in medical school or going into your residency. Third, I would say, is if you were really certain that you want to go into primary care and you're not really that interested in adding a procedural component to your practice when you go into private practice, just be aware that you're going to have competition from insurance companies. You're going to have pressure from government payers. You're going to have competition from mid-level providers like nurse practitioners and physician assistants. Just be ready and prepared for that, and know going in that that's going to be somewhat of a challenge. And fourth, what I would say is, if you are thinking about going into what maybe is a pure primary care practice, or if you're you're a physician now in private practice and you're doing primary care, you may be interested in the trend towards physicians setting up direct primary care practices in which they essentially get patients who are subscribers to their practices, and they go into practices where they don't take commercial insurance, and perhaps they don't take government insurance like Medicare, but just have subscriber patients who pay them directly for their services. There's a trend towards that. There's a quality of life component to that for a lot of physicians who go into it. I've talked about direct primary care and some of the issues that you have to think about, such as opting out of Medicare, setting up your subscriber agreements with your patients. I've talked about this in the past on some of my other videos and podcasts. It's something to consider and think about because of the pressure from insurance companies, mid-level providers, and just government payment programs, to look into, if you're a primary care doctor, look into at least the possibility of considering a direct primary care model. And I would be glad to talk to you about that. That's it for today. I hope this helps, and we'll see you again next time.